Vanadium redox flow batteries are starting to be considered a suitable technology for long-duration energy storage. Using electrolytes stored in tanks, they can scale up well and withstand frequent cycling. However, as with any relatively new tech, the question isn't whether the technology works, but where addressable markets exist for the services it provides. PV Tech Storage recently met with Tom Tipple of Imagy Power Systems, which makes flow batteries with recovered waste materials. Sun Edison has opted to buy 100 megawatt hours of Imagy systems for rural electrification and microgrids in India. Meanwhile, the US Navy has also been trying out Imagy batteries for a smart microgrid demonstration project. We asked Tom for his observations on regional markets in Africa, Germany and India. Obviously getting things commercialised, as you mentioned, and getting them deployed is really a question, I guess, of finding which markets at the moment are most interesting. You said yourself that you've got responsibility for a number of areas, including South Africa and Germany.
Yeah.
Perhaps tell us a little bit about perhaps
certainly.
some of the drivers, differences, and some of the demand and interest.
Yeah, and I think again, it's not a case of we don't want to go to the other opportunities at the moment. It's just that there's a magnet really from certain countries, certain applications. We're going to where that magnet is pulling strongest at the moment. South Africa, they've had great power for years. It's faltering a little bit right now. So we're coming in there, providing essentially it's grid firming. We're providing almost like a UPS function, which a lot of experts will say you shouldn't, as a flow battery, you shouldn't do that. You should not really be looking at the UPS market. That is better for a lead acid or lithium market. The trouble is the outages are happening every day and probably 2 or 3 times a day. So in fact, it's a highly cyclic market, and flow battery equals cycles. The more cycles, the better in a way. So we're not good at sitting at full charge, waiting for an outage for weeks on end, months on end. That's the wrong application. Where you've got a grid problem where you are seeing significant outages per day, and in some cases these outages are 4 hours, so 2 or 3 4-hour outages a day. It's getting pretty chronic. We're ideally suited because we're constantly charging and discharging. And that obviously has no impact on the battery at all. The other thing you'll find about South Africa, it's almost a bit. It's not the perfect storm, but you have a huge disparity between peak rates and off-peak grid rates on tariffs. In the winter time there, which is obviously our summertime in the UK, there's a ratio of about 8 to 1 between a peak price and an off-peak price. So here's a great opportunity where I'm arbitraging. I'm collecting at night, I'm storing at night, and discharging during the day, and ideally discharging during those peak periods from say something like 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock in the morning and then in the afternoon. If I can get out of those high peak times by using essentially an off-peak rate, I'm just lowering my grid tariff tremendously. So you start to look at, okay, I've got a system that can cover an outage. I've got a demand management system here. I can utilize off-peak, cheap off-peak rates. And the other one, which is not such a big contributor, but if you look at any business that has a very peaky power profile, where you've got massive spikes, you're charged on the maximum power over that particular month. And if you go over, you nominate what your maximum power will be. If you go over that, they raise the bar and you're charged at that rate for the next year. So you have to be very careful to manage your peaks or stay within your nominated peak. We can lower that demand. We can just bring that right down. So every time your site, your installation, your business hits a certain peak, the battery cuts in and just shaves the peak. So again, the whole trick, I would say in one sentence, is we're trying to smooth the output. We're trying to make smoothing renewables, smoothing grid power, just trying to make it much more predictable what's going to happen. And that's the key to storage, is that knowing what's going to happen, that predictability.
So I guess if it's peak shaving, that's also a pretty strong driver within other markets like the US, I guess, for commercial electricity users as well.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, in the US, I would say principally we're obviously involved in a number of large solar projects. It's similar to the UK in terms of there's a given PPA or essentially a sort of feed-in tariff. What we're able to do is just smooth that out. So we can say that, it's not going to be a peaky profile. It's not going to be essentially a solar profile. We're now going to give you a stabilized input into the grid, into the utility. And if that ability to feed into the grid is not there, then you're providing self-consumption. And we're seeing that again a little bit in Germany. We're seeing that starting to come into the UK a little bit now. We're seeing it a lot in South Africa. It's called grid defection, and it's for various reasons. Grid defection in Germany is, I'm fed up with the high tariffs, and now solar plus storage is cheaper than the grid. So that's it. I don't need to. I can now get off grid. I can basically become grid independent. I can provide free electricity for my house for a minimal investment, and that's becoming a big driver.
With Germany as well, you've got a high deployment of renewables. That's clearly a strong driver. But latterly also, the other market that I think people seem to get quite excited about is frequency regulation, and we've seen that a little bit in the PJM service area of the US. That's one that people are getting excited about. And I think in Germany it's starting to take off, but there are some technical barriers, and presumably that's something that you feel that you guys can combat with the batteries that you have.
Germany's a very well thought out, well structured market for the voltage frequency regulation. We're looking at participating in the secondary control reserve market, the SCR market. There are essentially three markets: there's the primary, the secondary, and the minute market. The primary is probably the right technology for the primary market is probably a lithium play, because the requirement is for a short duration, probably up to a maximum of 15 minutes duration capacity. Secondary control market requires a 4-hour capacity duration, so it fits nicely into that vanadium redox space. So that's the market we're interested in, and you have to have, I would say, a minimum of 10 megawatts. So you have to have an energy park that's around 10 megawatts, 40 megawatt hour storage to be able to play in that game. We are an equipment vendor, we're an equipment manufacturer and a designer and manufacturer, and we're working within a consortium that is managing the arbitrage. And essentially it's just balancing out that renewables. It's just trying to make that smooth output where you have a high renewable power input into the grid and it's nowhere to go, and then other way around where there's a huge demand from the grid and the renewables aren't there. So again, it's just that balancing out. From a technology point of view, you have to be able to instantly change up to every 15 minutes, absolutely instantly, within 50 milliseconds from a charge to discharge or storing to discharging environment, which is no problem. I think that the technical barriers are, again, if you left this to the utilities, then probably there'd be a reluctance to engage in this market. And the government's been quite smart in that they've taken away the control that the utilities had here, and they've said, if you as a private company, as a private consortium, can meet the technical requirements, then you can play in the game. So they've taken it. It's basically it's a free zone now, not free zone, but it's a free enterprise zone. It's not controlled by the utilities. They certainly have to approve any system that goes in, and that's a little bit of a barrier because that approval process can take a little longer than sometimes it should do. But again, there's a very clear set of regulatory requirements that you've got to adhere to, and once you've adhered to that, then legally they are obliged to connect you to the grid. So we're looking to play in this market now. There are no other flow battery players in that market. There are about 3 companies looking in there. We think we'll be the first. There's no lithium in there because lithium's the wrong technology for secondary control. We think there's probably around a potential of about 20, it's between 20 to 50 energy parks of this 10 megawatt size. And it's almost, as soon as number 1's built, then it'll start to snowball on there. If you look at the requirement, it's massive. I mean, if you were to look at just in terms of storage, I mean, you need 100, 200 megawatt, 200 parks of this sort of size, because that difference between renewables and your baseline distribution is huge. And potentially, it's growing all the time. So there will be an ongoing need to manage that buffering, that storage solution.
Okay.
and it's very well managed. It's very well run. It's bid every week, so you essentially you have to. There's no chance of locking yourself into a contract for a year. You have to be competitive every single week. You've got to be competitive as other players are coming in. So it's a fascinating market, and we're pretty confident we've got the perfect technology for that.